You were probably all familiar with the animated television series on Cartoon Network, Courage the Cowardly Dog, created by John Dilworth. It's about a pink dog named Courage who lived with his two owners, Muriel and Eustace. They lived in the middle of nowhere in a small cottage. The show's plot consists around monsters or other creepy things, kidnappings, or disturbing a small family, and it was up to Courage to save everyone. I absolutely loved the show when I was younger. It made up a huge chunk of my childhood. Although the show was funny and clever, there were many moments where that deeply scarred me. I can name at least 3 episodes that given me nightmares. It ran for 4 seasons, and each season contained 13 episodes. It had been canceled for reasons you'll conclude while reading. However, it still airs reruns. Nevertheless, Courage the Cowardly Dog was my favorite show, and it stayed that way, well up until a month ago. I was at a local thrift store in Traverse City, Michigan, about 30 minutes away from my house. My little cousin was going to visit in a few days, and I was looking through their VCR tapes. I was hoping to find an old Disney movie, Aladdin, so we could watch it together. While nosing around for the tape collection, struggling to find the movie I desired, I came across an old dusty VCR without a case. On the front, it had the piece of tape with the words CTCD S4E14, scribbled in rather hastily with black Sharpie marker. I immediately presumed that it meant Courage the Cowardly Dog, having it heard being abbreviated like that numerous times. Of what I knew, there were only 13 episodes in each season, so I thought that I might have missed an episode. Eager to watch it, I bought the tape for $2.99 and quickly left, forgetting to purchase the Disney movie that I came here for. Once I arrived at my small apartment, I quickly popped the tape into my VCR and sat in front of the television, just like when I had as a kid. The screen jumped around and then cut to a familiar intro like always. You know, with the nagging voice of the news reporters and the old-fashioned wooden television, and so forth. Nostalgia hit me like a brick to the face. I smiled as the old memories of the old show flooded into my brain. Even so, something seemed wrong. The tape's tint appeared to be darker than usual. The visual was choppy and bulky, and the sound was a little disoriented. I assumed that it was from the poor condition that the tape was in. I shrugged it off. Once the intro ended, the title card appeared. Only it seemed strange, disturbing, morbid, and even more than usual. There was a poor quality of oil paintings of what appeared to be some Jason Voorhees with his hockey mask and chainsaw. On the chainsaw was his dark plaid shirt with splashes of blood in what appeared to be in scarlet red handwritten canyon with the words Massacre Matt. This dumbfounded me. I knew that the show had a dark setting, but not this dark or gruesome. I wonder why I had not seen this episode before. When I recalled factually that I had watched every episode of the series, I continued on watching, even though the back of my mind told me not to. The scene hastily cut to the inside of Courage's home. Static interrupted the screen for a few moments, but quickly returned. It was very poor quality and darker usual episode, as if it was meant to be like that. Muriel had visible wrinkles and looked very depressed, slowly rocking back and forth in her rocking chair. Eustace has his traditional scowl on his face reading the newspaper. Courage was on the floor of the house, looking very sad. He was shaking with red eyes, as if he was crying earlier. He seemed thinner than usual. His ribs were easily seen through his pink fur, as if it had not been fed in a while. An eerie silence laid upon the scene for 30 seconds. The only sound heard was Muriel's chair rocking. To break the stillness, Courage let out a small moan. Eustace rolled up his newspaper and smacked the dog, shouting, "Stupid dog!" His voice sounded concernedly different and disoriented, like his voice actor was upset, or not trying to pull off the character's voice. He violently smacked Courage continuously, and smacked him hard. Muriel just watched in silence, not jumping as if she would have done. Courage let out a small yelps of pain, but appeared to be he was unable to move. Tears began to form around his eyes, and Eustace eventually stopped and read the paper again. I began to question this cartoon's legitimacy. It was getting darker and darker, the personality. Suddenly there was a very loud knock on the door. It was almost hyper-realistic. For a moment I thought it had came from my own apartment door. Muriel got up from her chair and opened the door, lingering creak escaping the rusty hinges. Standing on the old wooden porch was a low-budget CGI of a tall man with a hockey mask, holding a large red chainsaw. He had red bloodshot eyes, and he wore olive green plaid shirt with torn up jeans. He was only slowly swaying back and forth. The screen went out of focus and blurred, then cut to static for about 10 seconds. My nerves were creeping up my spine, telling me to turn off the television. However, my dumb curiosity kept me sitting there. The screen jumped around, and when it returned, I was in the worst quality then possible. It was fuzzy and difficult to make out the characters' faces, or tell what they were doing. With some effort, I was able to picture the strange man entering the family's home. Muriel stepped aside to allow him to do so. Courage sat up, shaking. Then the screen jumped again, and it returned to the better quality. The screen closed on the man, presumably Massacre Matt. He stared at the screen intensively. The camera eerily zoomed in on his face, and you could see his crazed, bloodshot eyes. What disturbed me the most was that they were hyper-realistic eyes. He stayed there for about 3 minutes, just staring at the screen. Absolute silence hovered in the air. My heart began to pound, but I stood my ground. Finally, it cut back to Courage. He screamed the traditional scream, although it was much louder than usual normal. Matt then pulled a string of his chainsaw and started up with a roar. He lifted it into the air, ready to slice the little pink dog. Then the screen cut to a Scooby-Doo style chase scene. I think this part was supposed to be funny because the chainsaw is hearing it starting up with a roar. He lifted into the air, ready to slice the little pink dog. Then it cut to a Scooby-Doo, but of course, that was supposed to be in dead silence. I did not find it a bit humorous. It was done in dead silence, as if it was supposed to be music or some other noise whatsoever. But the animators forgot to put it in. The scene went on for about 30 seconds, until they ran back into the living room. Matt kicked Courage to the wall, holding him down with his boot. Slowly, almost tortuously, Matt lowered the chainsaw to the dog's flesh. Courage hysterically cried for help, struggling to free from being pinned to the floor. Eustace just stood there, his arms crossed, and he smiled a very creepy grin. Muriel was nowhere to be seen. I began to inch away from the television, my eyes opened wide. What the hell was going on? Finally, the sharp blades of the chainsaw reached the poor dog's sobbing flesh, gruesomely cutting into his skin. Blood splattered everywhere, and Courage let out a blood-curdling scream. However, it was cut short as static, and sound quality decreased. Even so, the visual stayed, and the chainsaw eventually cut the dog in half. 2 parts of his blood-stained body fell to the floor. My mind raced, my breathing became heavier, and tears began to form in my eyes. How was this real? This had to be fake, right? But how could someone be able to exactly copy the animator's style? I was so skillfully and realistically drawn, with the blood and gore scattered everywhere. I could make out Courage's internal organs as they slowly swept from his decapitated lower body. His eyes were rolled back into his head. A small stream of blood trickled out of his mouth, and the camera stayed focused on the dead dog for nearly 2 minutes. All of my instincts told me to turn it off, to look away from the disgusting image, but my eyes were glued to the television. The camera then switched to Matt, now splattered with blood. He stood up and then turned to Eustace. Eustace grinned and handed Matt a wad of cash. Matt took the money and left the house. Eustace chuckled silently as he looked out of the open door, saying something that I could not make out due to static. Then it silently cut to the credits, something that would not normally happen. I just jumped shortly after the beginning, and cut to static about 7 seconds into the credits. I sat there in the carpet in my apartment, tears streaming down my face. What the fuck did I just watch? Why would the animators do something like this? I stayed there deeply shocked, for maybe 10 minutes after it ended, lost in thought. Shaking in my head, I ejected the tape from my VCR, hastily chucking it in the wall, in the sudden burst of anger and fear. Surprisingly, it did not break, or appeared to have any scratches on it whatsoever. I left it on the floor and went to my laptop, very frightened of what I just saw. Was that even real? I searched everywhere for the internet for someone with a similar experience with this episode, but to no avail. After a couple of days, I recuperated from what I have just seen. I decided to set up my camera somewhere in front of the television and to pop the tape again. I wanted proof of this demented monstrosity. I closed my eyes and waited for the massacre to begin. But there was nothing. It was just static. I've tried everything, from rewinding, retaping, cleaning the tape, replacing the VCR, even replacing the television. But it will not play. I don't know how or why it will not play. I plan to keep the tape with me, because if I ever find a procedure that will make it play again, I could show it to the public. I cannot even look at the tape for anymore though. I kept it in my shoebox in my basement. I've tried contacting Cartoon Network previous animators and crew members on the show, and even John Dilworth himself, yet none of them will give me an answer. John and his crew members sounded nervous on the phone, however, but they insisted that they did not know what I was talking about. To this day, this unaired episode haunts my dreams. I can never watch the show again, let alone think about its characters, without being deeply terrified again. Please, if any of you have seen this episode, if you have heard of it, if you know the first story or the tape how it ended up there, or if you're working on a copy of it, please contact me. This is real, and I need to find out more about this. Thank you and best regards.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.